Hi students, in this video we will be going over the measures of central tendency. Our essential question for this lesson is, how are the measures of central tendency calculated and organized into a box and whisker plot? So one more time, the essential question is, how are the measures of central tendency calculated and organized in a box and whisker plot? So the first thing we're going to go over is the mean, median, mode, and range. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this lesson because we'll be spending some time on it in class, but also because you guys have gone over this for several years, especially in 6th grade. I know you guys spent a lot of time on this material. So first, the mean is the average of the numbers. So when you have a set of numbers, the mean is the average. And we will go over how to calculate that in a few. The median is the middle number. So once you organize those numbers from least to greatest, the median is that number that is in the middle. The mode, and this one is one of the easiest ones, this is the number that occurs the most often. So the number that you see the most frequently. And the range is the difference between the largest number and smallest number. And the key word here is the difference. And difference is talking about subtraction. So that means you're subtracting the largest number from the smallest number to get the range. Now these are very important definitions, so I highly suggest that you write these down. So let's look at an example, and we're going to find the mean, median, mode, and range for each of these. So first it says the weekly salaries of 6 employees at McDonald's are $140, $220, $90, $180, $140, and $200. And we want to find the mean, median, and mode and range for each of these. So let's start with the mean. Okay, and the mean is the average. And to find the average, what we have to do is we have to add all of these numbers together and divide it by the number of numbers. So as you can see, we're adding all 6 of these numbers together. And how many numbers were there? There were 6. So we're going to then divide by that. So we're adding all the numbers together and dividing by 6 because there are 6 numbers here. So you can totally use a calculator for this. If you want to use a calculator to make this a little bit easier, I would highly suggest it. And remember, you can use one on a quiz that is a handheld calculator. And if I add all those together, I get 970 divided by 6. And that's not going to come out very evenly, which is why a calculator is very helpful. And when I divide that, I get 161. And it goes on forever and ever, but if we round that 6, it's going to make that a 7. So I just put it in the hundredths place. So our mean then is 161.67. Now what this means is that on average, the employees at McDonald's are making $161 or almost $162 a week. So that means on average. Now the average could be high for some people or low for some others. So for instance, the average is a little bit higher than this person that's making $90 a week, but it's also lower than the person that's making $200. This is just an average amount. It doesn't mean it's exactly what everyone makes. Now the median is the middle number. And the way, you can't just find the middle number based upon how they're organized now. You have to order them from least to greatest. So you have to find the smallest number, which is 90, and then write that down, and then write down the next smallest number, all the way up to 220. So as you can see, I put these in numerical order from least to greatest. Now what's interesting about this is that there isn't a middle number, okay? And so if I were to just draw a line, you'd see that the middle ends up being like right there. Okay, and so you have to ask yourself, what do I do when I can't easily find the middle number? And actually what you just do is you just take the average, the mean, of the 2 numbers that are in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to take the average of these 2 numbers, and you might even be able to think about this just logically, and if you can, that's fine, and you don't have to show that work. But if you ask yourself, what's exactly between 140 and 180? You might be able to figure that out right away just by using logic. But if you can't, or if you know you're going to get a decimal, what you can do is add those 2 numbers together, so 140 and 180, and divide it by the number of numbers. Okay, this is just like the mean. And If you have a problem where it's an odd number of numbers and you know exactly what the median is, that's really nice, and we'll look at a problem like that later. But in this case, we have to find the median since there was no middle number written. Now, if I add these up, I get 320. And when I divide that by 2, I get 160. And so earlier, when I said you might be able to logically just figure this out without doing the math, think about it. 160 is right in between 140 and 180, which that makes that the median or the middle number. So a lot of you guys can figure that out without the math, but sometimes there's some tricky problems where you might need to do the math. And in those cases, you just add those two numbers together and divide it by 2 to get 160. And it says that the median number is 160. And as you notice, the mean and median, a lot of times, they can be pretty similar, pretty close. Not always. Sometimes they can be a little bit farther off. But in this case, they are pretty similar. Now, I think that those two are probably the most difficult. And as we move on to mode and range, those are probably the most easiest ones to find. So when we find the mode is just the number that occurs the most. So look at these numbers. Which one, after we put them in order, because sometimes that helps, occurs the most? And it's pretty easy because 140 occurs the most. So 140 then is the mode, because 140 occurs twice, whereas all the other numbers only occur once. So the mode is $140. And finally, we have the range. And as I mentioned earlier, the range is the difference between the highest number and the lowest number. And the difference tells us that we have to subtract. So we find the highest number, which is 220, and we're going to subtract it from the lowest number, which is 90. Okay, so when we subtract those numbers, we get 130. So that means the range, or the distance, you can think about it as the distance between the lowest pay and the highest pay is $130. And so that's pretty much all the time we're going to spend on mean, median, mode, and range, because you guys have spent a lot of time on that in the past, but we will be doing some practice on this over the next couple of days. Okay? Now this is a little bit of a different type of problem. It says, Andy has grades of 84, 65, and 76 on 3 math tests. What grade must he receive on the next test to have an average of exactly 80 for the 4 tests? Now, I know that there are a lot of times where you guys say, well, when am I going to use this in real life? I definitely used this when I was in college, because I remember lots of times looking at tests and going, oh, okay, so even if I got a really bad grade on this one, if I get a really good one later, then I'll still have the average that I need to make sure that I'm getting a good grade in this class. Now, the reason this is a little bit different is because you have to work backwards on this problem. Okay, so you have to think, okay, I need everything here to equal 80. And average tells us what? When we think about average, we're talking about the mean. Okay, so when we're thinking about average, we're talking about the mean. And when you think about mean, that's where you add up all the numbers and you divide it by the number of numbers. So here on this side, because we're going to create an equation, we're going to add up all the numbers that we need and divide it by 4 to equal 80. But as you notice, we have a variable here, because think of this. We've got 84 is one of our scores, 65 is the other, 76 is the third score. However, we've got this 4th test that still hasn't been taken yet. Okay, so that's why we're using a variable, because we don't know what we need to get to be able to get an 80 average. And we divide that by 4, because how many tests are there going to be at the very end of if it's maybe quarter or semester, there's going to be 4. Okay, so we divide it by 4. And from here, this should look pretty similar to some equations problems that we've done in the past. You just need to start simplifying, and the first step to simplify is to add these 3 numbers together. Remember, use a calculator. It'll make your life easier. So now we have 225 plus x, so I combine these 3 numbers, over 4 equals 80. Now remember, we want to get x by itself, so the opposite of dividing by 4 would be to multiply by 4. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so then what we have here now is that these cancel out on this side, right? And I'm left with 225 plus x equals 80 times 4 is 320. Okay, and now the opposite of a positive 225 would be to subtract 225 from both sides. And remember that this is then going to cancel out, leaving us with x equals 95. So what this tells us is that Andy needs to get a 95 on that last test to be able to have an average of 80 on the 4 tests. Okay, so he needs to do really, really well on that last test. So this is a pretty important problem because you will have some practice on this and you have to learn how to work backwards to be successful. All right, now this part is probably the point where we're going to go over a lot of new material. Everything else from this point, or what we just did, was very much review. But box and whisker plots, this is a type of graph that you haven't gone over before. And so a box and whisker plot is basically a plot that is used to show the spread or the variability of a set of data. Now, a set of data is just a set of numbers, just like we were looking at with mean, median, and mode. It is a set of numbers. And it takes that data and it divides it into 4 parts using 5 data points on a number line. It sounds really confusing, but it's actually very easy. But this is what a box and whisker plot looks like. You see a number line, and right above it, you see this box. And then think about it, these are like the whiskers, okay, if you think about a cat. So here's the box, and then these are the whiskers. And down here, this represents the minimum. This represents the smallest number that exists. And then right here, we have what's called the lower quartile. Right in the very, very middle is the median. And that makes sense because the middle number is the median. The point right here where you see this line is called the upper quartile. So you can see each of these are represented by a line. And the last number right here, this dot represents the maximum or the highest number. Now, what's very important about this is that each part represents 25% of the data, okay? So right here, this represents 25% of the data from here to there. We've got another 25% of the data from here to here. Okay, there's another 25% of the data from there to there. And finally, there's 25% of the data from here to here. That didn't draw very well on that time. There we go. Now, what's important about this is that, think about that, quartile sounds like quarters, okay? So this is a quarter right here, okay? And this is a quarter, and this is a quarter, and so on, okay? It's getting a little messy. And so this means that if I was to go from all the way from here, say, and then was looking all the way to the median, this would be 50% of the data. It would be right there, okay? However, if I just went, say, from here to here, that would just be 25%, okay? But if I went through the whole thing from end to end and went all the way to the end, that entire thing is 100%, because 25, 25, 25, 25 is 100. Or what if I went from the minimum all the way up to the upper quartile and stopped right here, okay? So this is 25. I've got another 25 in here, another 25, which makes, and those are terrible 25s, a total of 75 from here to the upper quartile. And so each of these points represents a set of 25% of the data, okay? And once we start going through this, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. Now, we've got a lot of steps to talk about, but they're very easy steps. Very first step, order the numbers from least to greatest. Easy, easy step. Once you do that, find the median. Once you find that, find the median of the lower quartile, or the lower half, and we'll talk about what that means. If you find the median of the lower quartile, you need to find the median of the upper quartile, or the upper half. You have to find the minimum, so the lowest number. You have to find the maximum, or the highest number. And then you plot this above a number line. And that's pretty important there, that above. That remember, that box and whisker plot was above the number line. Okay, so Mrs. Kelly gave her Math 7 honor students a quiz. The quiz was out of 20 points. The scores are listed below. Now we're going to go through each step. So it says, first, order the numbers from least to greatest. So that's a really easy step. I start with 5, and I find the next lowest number all the way up, okay? And then what I need to do is I need to find the median of the data. I have to find the median of the data. So let's try to break this up, okay? If I break this up, I see that the median is going to be right here in the middle, which means that this half to the left is what we call the lower half. And this half to the right of the median is called the upper half. So I just kind of split this into two, with the median being in the very middle and having a lower half of data and an upper half of data. And the median, like I said, is right there in the very middle. And so that's very easy to find. The median is 13. So super easy. And as you can see, I'm not even drawing anything yet. All I am simply doing right now is just finding this information that I need to go through. Now, the median was very easy to find, and basically that kind of just hangs out there, and the median hangs out there in the middle on its own. And what we have now is we've got this lower half, or the lower quartile, and we got to find the middle number right in there. And so there's actually two middle numbers, and I think you guys could figure this out without doing the math. But what's exactly between 8 and 9? That would be 8.5. And so our median of this lower half is 8.5, because that's the number that's right between those two numbers. Now in the upper half, we've got two numbers again right in the middle. And that is going to make our upper quartile right between 18 and 19, which is going to be 18.5. Okay? Minimum is really easy. The minimum is the smallest number, so that's going to be 5. And the maximum is going to be the largest number, which is 19. So as you can see, actually finding that information is very easy, and it requires very little math, actually almost no math. You're pretty much just finding the numbers. And then what you do is you draw a number line, okay? And so when you draw this number line, the first thing you do is you find the median, okay? So you see the median is 13, and you just draw a line, okay? See how I drew a line right here. The next thing you do is you find the median of the lower quartile, which is 8.5, and you draw another line right between it. So you can see it's between 8 and 9. So I drew a line, a vertical line at 13, a vertical line at 8.5, and now I'm going to do a vertical line at 18.5. I'm just going to leave that there for now, okay? So that's all you have to do with the medians. So all the medians have a vertical line. Now the minimum, we're just going to put a dot, because remember we got to have those whiskers. And the maximum is going to have another dot right over here, okay? So we've got everything now has been basically plotted above the line. We've got our dots for the minimum and maximum, and our vertical lines for the medians. And really then we just create a box, okay? I just draw a line around those vertical lines to make it a box. And then one single horizontal line will go from one dot to the other dot and cut through the box and whisker and make a box and whisker plot. And that's it. That's really all you have to do. So as you can see, there's very little math, and it's actually just kind of finding the information and writing it out. Last thing I want to do is go over one final example. That way you can go through this one more time with me on this box and whisker plot. All right, so the ages for the members of the 2012 U.S. women's basketball team were the following. So there's a bunch of numbers there. And our first step is that we got to order them from least to greatest, okay? And so we order all these numbers from least to greatest. And we've got quite a few numbers here. Now, if you count these numbers up, you're going to see that it's an even number. And what that does is that puts 6 numbers over here on the lower half and 6 numbers on the right side in the upper half. And so what we noticed this time is that last time we had a nice even median. Like we didn't have to do any work to find it. It was just right there. But this time, since it's an even set of numbers, the two sets of data get split evenly in half. Okay? So then the question is, what is the median? If these are my two middle numbers, well, they're both 25, right? So if they're both 25, then the median has to be 25. So very easy. Okay. Now on the next part, what we do is we have to look at the middle numbers over here, okay, the median of the lower quartile. And there's actually 2 numbers in the middle, because remember, this bracket is going over the whole entire lower half. And so the lower quartile has 22 and 24 as being the middle numbers. So ask yourself, what's between 22 and 24? Well, that's really easy. It's just 23. And we do the same thing with the upper half. 28 and 30 are right in the middle of the upper half. And so what is that number that's right in the middle of 28 and 30? That's 29. That's it. The smallest number is the minimum, which is 18. And the largest number is the maximum, which is going to be 30. So once again, finding that data, finding that information was actually very easy. And although this looks like a lot going on, this is really helpful if you draw these box and circles and label everything as you're going through it. It'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so you draw a number line, and it seems like my number line got a little bit off, so let's hope that this works out well when it comes through and it's being graphed. It looks like it is. So we've got a vertical line right here, and it goes right above the 25 because that's our median. Remember, the medians all have vertical lines going right above that number line. We've also got a median, the lower one, at 23, so another vertical line right there. And there is a median over here at 29. So the medians, remember, all have vertical lines going right above that number line and above those points. Now the minimum is at 18, which means we're just going to put a dot right there. And the maximum is 30, so we're going to put a dot right there. Now we've got our, basically the start of our box and whisker plot, and to finish that, we just draw a line around the box, and that creates our box. And then there's a line that goes from the minimum all the way through to the maximum. And that's it. Our box and whisker plot is created. Alright, so the last part that you have to do for this is complete the 3 practice problems that are on the foldable, and then you are done with your homework for the night. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Thanks. Bye.